Hello, everyone. What do you know? We're playing Wind Waker again. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? What do you know? What do you know? Just something I wanted to do on this channel, and just like I thought it'd be fun to play Wind Waker. Look at that ceiling. I've never noticed that ceiling before. Interesting. We're gonna have to take a look at that in a second. Because I mean, yeah, like this room is so much about like what's happening on the ground. It's rare to look up. Um, and like I mean that seriously. Because I mean Wind Waker is like full of so many interesting little areas, and I mean part of my mission with Wind Waker Unflooded is like paying attention to like its modeling conventions. Like this is interesting, right? Like that very cubic style, that texture. Like what material is it supposed to be? Is that supposed to be stone? Um, the way it's like cut feels like maybe part of a pyramid even, which really does connect it to something like the Spirit Temple from Ocarina of Time, right? Like that kind of style, which I think is interesting, right? Because like that's part of the interpretation is like what is the style of the exterior of these dungeons. We never get to really see them. We're told that they exist within the overworld of Hyrule, but we only see them as context of being underneath islands, right, as a part of mountains, and that's all we get um, in game, which I don't know. I just think that that's interesting. Now what do I do? Oh, I see. I see what I have to do. Medley, I'm not done with you yet. You are not finished here yet, Medley. But yeah, I mean, like that's just always part of the creative challenge of Wind Waker Unflooded. Is there's locations that like we explore in game, but that doesn't mean we get the full context of what they are. And like I've worked on the exterior of the Earth Temple, um, and right now it's just like a part of the mountain, and that's what's most important. Um, but it could be worth adding some more exterior elements, like to show the exterior architecture. These are all just things I think about. For those that don't know, on this channel, I also do a project called Wind Waker Unflooded, which is a 3D modeling fan art project where I am reimagining Hyrule as it could have existed within the world and art style of The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker, through the power of 3D modeling. It's really ambitious. It's taken a long time, and it will take a long time. I think I'm about halfway done. That's kind of what my estimates are. But there's still a long road ahead. But I'm excited about it, and just that's part of why I'm replaying The Wind Waker now, is so that I can just get more insight into these locations for the sake of 3D modeling, right? So that I can see like how does the game itself give context to these locations and just kind of ground myself in the material. That has to come first. We got the compass. Let's go. Let's go. This is huge. This is gonna change everything. Hey yo, who's talking to me? Hey yo. Hey, Joe, do not worry about straying away from Medley in the depths of the temple. Just relax and open your dungeon map. As long as you have the compass, you can easily confirm her whereabouts. Oh, yeah? Like, for real? Like, you mean that? Okay. But, like, I don't want to leave her behind, so stay with me, Medley. Stay with me. Stay with me. Join me. I know the King of Red Lions just said you didn't have to, but I don't want to leave you behind if I can help it. Okay? How about this? I'm gonna get you to fly up here. Here we go. All right. Hey yo. All right. Hey yo. All right. Let's open the door. It is time to fight some enemies. Let's do it. Let's see. I see some moblins. Tag yourself as Zelda enemies. Comment down below your favorite Zelda enemy. Oh man, there's so many that I love that I have such fond joy. I mean, I say that they're monsters, right? But I'm like, especially in Wind Waker, right? Like, I love the design of moblins. They're funny, and I think it's just funny because as a kid, like, I bought into the fact that they were scary, right? And like, I didn't actually think they were scary, of course, design wise, but like, just this idea that they were like powerful, right? Because they're responsible for like locking Link away in jail in the Forsaken Fortress. Um, like they're one hit KOs essentially because of that, right? They totally reset your progress if they see you. So it's like there's consequences, right? And you buy into the fact that like this is an enemy with consequences. And they are powerful and their spears are like nothing to be trifled with. and yet, it's just like they're just little funny cartoon monsters. And I think like this game just does such a good job at that, at getting you to buy into the power of its enemies, even though the enemy, like, the combat's not particularly hard, right? But there's consequences, right? And even the pose, like, these are really simple enemies, but you have to be careful or else, like, they'll take control of you. But maybe that's not such a bad thing, like reversing the controls. Like, let's see, is he about to go in? No, he's just gonna attack. I guess I could go ahead and activate the light, draw him in there, but to me it's just easier if he can, like, possess me and I can, like, walk away. You know what I'm saying? Like, and is that just RNG? That might just be RNG. I love the design of his mask too. Like, let's look at that. Like, it has that, like, jagged teeth. Like, it almost feels like Scarecrow's mask. I like that. I love that design. Shout out to the pose, man. Because, like, obviously it's not as scary as, like, the Re-Dead masks from, like, Ocarina of Time, right? But it elicits something similar. I don't know. Like, and I appreciate that this game, like, goes out of its way to, like, have Re-Deads and Pose and Stalfos, and, like, obviously it has its own art style, and those things aren't, like, as viscerally scary as they were in Ocarina of Time. But, like, I appreciate them still being in this game. And I guess, like, I think Ocarina of Time is so interesting because, like, there's ways in which it's more realistic, but really it's just more textured, right? And, like, that's the thing. It's like you look at a Re-Dead in Ocarina of Time, and you can feel that it's, like, gross. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just feel that grime. Same with the bottom of the well and the Shadow Temple, and they just feel grimy. That's the thing. And Wind Waker doesn't quite have that tangibility. But the thing is, Ocarina of Time is still, like, cartoonish. And I guess, like, that's the thing that people don't want to hear is, like, you look at the manual art for Ocarina of Time, and it's always kind of had that, like, anime aesthetic, right? It's always been like a cartoon brought to life. You look at the character designs, the character modeling is, like, incredibly simplified, and you look at young and adult Link and all these different characters that feel incredibly cartoonish, right? And that's just the facts. I don't know, can I reach those statues? I don't know if I can, even with Medley's beam right now. But anyway, but yeah, I guess, like, that's the thing that people don't necessarily want to hear is, like, because I think, like, a lot of people have that memory of, like, Ocarina of Time coming out, thinking Zelda's, like, super serious, and then Wind Waker comes out and it's like, it's a cartoon? And it's like, well, it's always kind of been a cartoon, right? Like, that anime aesthetic has always been, like, part of it, right? It's just, like, focused in different ways, and, like, Twilight Princess has its own take on that aesthetic as well. Skyward Sword has its own take, but, like, the series has always had that blend of, like, cartoonishness in different ways, right? Like, the series has never been realistic. I would be interested if a game ever came out that wanted to be, like, realistic, but that's something that, like, I don't think the Zelda series needs to do. That's something that, like, I think would hinder development, right? Because as soon as, like, hey, yo, chill out with that, man. But, like, as soon as, like, you devote, like, gaming or, like, development resources to trying to make something, like, truly realistic and, like, photoreal, it's like that just opens up a can of worms, and it's going to make developing take even longer. I think that's what's wonderful about the style of Zelda games is that, like, there's something that, like, they're relatively simplistic, and you can do a lot, like, if you just know your way around their textures and how they're used, like, and even the style of Breath of the Wild, which I think would be harder for a 3D modeler to, like, to tap into. Like, there's still a lot of, like, simplicity compared to other games, right? And I think that goes a long way. It makes it a lot easier to develop new areas, and just, like, this is something I know as a modeler, as a 3D modeler who has played with the art style of the Wind Waker, right? And, like, obviously, like, there's things that I think I have a lot to learn from the conventions of the Wind Waker and its use of textures. There's things that I still am figuring out, but, like, I do think it's approachable, right? It's something that, like, like, I think it's not hard for someone to model something in the art style of the Wind Waker. It's very approachable, even if it's something that I'm still learning and figuring out. So I don't want to undermine that or downplay what it, like, the Wind Waker does well. But I think that, like, that is just, like, a reality, is that makes it a lot easier to create new areas. And I feel aware of that. And I think it's okay that, like, that is a strength of the Zelda series as a whole sometimes, right? Is that like development like is it seems to me like they try to focus development on the things that matter, right? In general, right? Like they're aware of like they could put a lot of resources into lighting engines and figuring some things out, and sometimes they do. Like the technical side is something that is like sometimes very important for the developers, but as a whole, it's about like how can they make the games more fun, or at least their idea of what makes the games more fun, and maybe that's subjective, right? Whether that's working on new gameplay systems or level design, or sometimes that's different depending on game to game. But it seems to me like they try to figure out like how can we devote the most resources to making sure that this works and that it's fun. Um, to me, I feel like that shows, and not waste time on other things, right? And not that it's a waste of time to work on those other things, but it's just the kind of thing that Zelda doesn't necessarily need. But anyway, that's just my analysis. But I'm not a game developer. I don't really know anything about game development. To be clear, I don't know. It's like, and I can talk about the 3D modeling, right? And like, I feel like I'm a source now on the 3D modeling because I've spent a lot of time looking at the Wind Waker's models and textures and analyzing those and ways in which I can use those textures and like figuring out how it puts things together, how it constructs environments and landscapes and terrain, and like I feel like I've studied that now, right? So I feel like I can be a source on that and talk about that. But I can't really talk about game design. That is not my field. I can only talk about it as like what I see as a player, right? Which I think is like you can still like criticize like without that knowledge, and I think that like that's like I do believe in that like obviously like I think it's always like I think a good critic is aware of the process and critiques with like the process in mind and is aware of that. But I also think like I think anyone has the right to say like when in regards to a piece of media like hey this affected me or hey this didn't, like I think this works or I don't think this works, right? And that doesn't necessarily have to come with education. I think it's better if it does, but I guess I want to be clear that I think anyone has the right to say like, oh, this landed for me or this didn't. I do think it behooves an audience member to recognize their biases and to say like, oh, did this not land because like you weren't paying attention to it, or are there other things that like, because I don't know, like sometimes people will talk about Oppenheimer and they're like, well, I just think the movie like it didn't really work for me. There's too much stuff to pay attention to. I'm like, I think that's your fault, you know? Like I think it's a good movie if you can be attentive, right? And follow along. But if people are like, well, it's just too confusing. And I think like anyone's entitled to their opinion there. But also like there are times where I'm like, I think maybe you should give it another try and pay attention, right? And it's okay not to like Oppenheimer, but to me, like just I've talked to some people who've said that to me. And maybe I didn't say this to their face, but I felt that. And I'm like, well, is it the movie's fault that you didn't get it, or is it just because you didn't give it a fair shot, right? And it's okay to like have that experience and to talk about it and say like, oh, like I think it was too much to get right now. It's probably a good movie, but like I don't have the mental capacity for it right now. Like you can have that conversation. Like there are great movies that like you have to just be in the mood for, and that's okay. That is totally okay. But anyway, media literacy and criticism stuff. I don't know. I could talk about that. But I don't know. I guess just like this to say is like I think it's okay that anyone can be a critic. I think it's always better if you can like give notes and say like, okay, I can criticize this, but like, what would have been better? Can I actually voice what would have been better? Because I think that sometimes I hear people criticize things and I'm like, it sounds like nothing would have made you happy, right? And I've heard people talk about the Zelda games like that, and it's like, well, you can say like what you wanted out of the game, but like, is it possible that like, it sounds like what you wanted is so specific that like would there have been anything that you would have like would anything have met your standards, right? And it's okay to have high standards, but I think you also have to be fair and say like am I criticizing the game on what it wants to be? Because I think I always assume developer intent, right? Like that's part of my criticism of media is that like I assume, do I think they reached what they were trying to reach, right? Like it and that's an assumption. That's an assumption just based on my understanding and assessment of their own goals as creators, which may or may not be accurate. but I think that it's okay to talk about that and say like, okay, it seems like these creators were trying to go for this. Based on that assumption, do I think that they met that goal, right? Because it's not, like it's not right to judge a movie or a book or a game based on the merits of a different one, right? Because not everyone, like I can say like, oh, this movie was great because of its practical effects or its sets. But like a movie doesn't need great effects or sets to be good. It can tell a good story and that's enough. But a movie that is about big ideas and fantasy and like needs that kind of execution is benefited by its production value, right? So it's like you have to be kind of careful, I think, in how you talk about that sometimes. Oh, I can destroy these from this distance. I wasn't even sure if I was close enough. What do you know? What do you know? What are y'all's theories about the elephant statues in the Earth Temple? Comment down below. I think I just need to reorient my C-stick because it's not quite lining up the way I want it to. I just have to be so precise with the joystick. Just trying to keep it there. Please work with me. Work with me. Work with me. Work with me. We're good. We're getting close. This will be close enough. I only ever needed to destroy one of them, but anyway. Anyway, let's get out of here. Or no, I need to go up there to... what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? I'm forgetting everything. It's like I've never played this game. I do appreciate that, though. Like, it's nice, like, to be able to, like, replay a game like this. A game that I've replayed so many times. And there's still puzzles that I have to, like, actively be aware of and solve. And, like, they're not hard. Like, this game is not hard. And you can get back into it and play pretty easily if you've done, like, one playthrough. Right? But like it's not nothing, right? And like I appreciate that like these dungeons like still ask things of the player. I appreciate that. All this for a joy pendant? I guess like the joy pendants are required. I don't know how many I have. Do I have enough to beat the game already? Let me check my spoils bag. I have 13. I think I need 20, right? Is that right? So we're getting there. Where is the beam? Here we go. Show me the beam. Where'd it go? Come on. Am I not far back enough? What am I doing wrong? There it goes. There we go. Let's go. I was in the zone. I was concentrated. I was like, we gotta get this door open, folks. All right. So, Medley, I'm gonna toss you. It's tossing time. You ready? Let's go. Bunk. I'm letting go. All right. Nice. Well, she was good sport about that. I thought she was going to get dizzy. But no, we're chilling. We're chilling, dog. Am I going to worry about any of that stuff? No. I think it's just rubies behind that wall. I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong, then I'll take the L, but I'm pretty sure. But yeah, now we're back to this room. We are back to this room. Obligatory Mark Brown Boss Keys reference talking about like classic Zelda dungeon design where you have to go back to a previous room to complete a puzzle you couldn't complete before. But Wind Waker doesn't, allow you to backtrack on your own. It goes, oh, what if we just tell you where to backtrack? I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I do think like obviously like I think in some ways like it would have promoted like better thinking or like to like force the player to backtrack on their own, but also at the same point time, it's like, what's the point? Like, if all that's missing from like if the way Ocarina of Time would have done this dungeon would have been to not have a shortcut, and Wind Waker has a shortcut, I don't think that's such a bad thing, right? It's like, okay, like so we've saved time on the player just retracing their steps. That's not particularly interesting. Now, I do think like that realization that the player has to realize that they need to backtrack is interesting, to remember a previous room and to put it in context with their new abilities. I do think that's interesting. And so maybe I'm not being totally fair. But also at the same time, it's like I think like if a player realizes that and there's a shortcut available, then we're not missing anything. In fact, we've gained something. But like that's just an opinion, right? And it doesn't really not a huge deal. To me, like that's not a huge deal. I don't know, like I always kind of feel like those macro dungeon design elements, like I think like they matter for certain temples. Like the Wind Temple is a good example of that. But like if it's just like putting in context what you've already learned, to me it's like that's not a huge loss. I don't know. I don't know. Like for a game like Wind Waker, I'm more concerned about like the room to room puzzles. Um, that's just kind of how I feel. Um, but I don't know. It's like I just like that just depends on the dungeon. Like with the Wind Temple, obviously is a dungeon where you have to think more about the overall layout. And the Wind Temple or the Earth Temple, this temple is just not necessarily about that. But anyway, I think that's about all the time we have for this video, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. But without further ado, I'll stop right here. I've really enjoyed replaying this temple. It's just to me, it's I do think it might be my favorite temple in the game. I love its atmosphere. I enjoy the puzzle still. Um, I love the enemies variety in this temple. I love the music. I love the mood. Just I love going into this hidden world. Then like this is what we see of Hyrule, right? Whenever I talk in my intros to my modeling videos, and I'm like, we never really get to explore Hyrule, but we do get to see its crypts, right? Its mausoleums. It's this temple. And like this is not indicative of the entire kingdom, which is why it's like I was so interested in modeling the rest of the world, because this is what we see of Hyrule. Here we are below the ocean, and it's these dark tunnels, right? And I'm like, I know that there is more to this world, and I think it's so interesting that what we see in game is this place. But anyway, without further ado, I will let you all go. So, see you in the next one. As always, you can support me as a creator by becoming a member on Patreon. There you'll get access to all kinds of exclusive behind-the-scenes content like in-progress outlines, scripts, storyboards, rough cuts, and even soundtracks for my newest films. By becoming a member, you'll also be thanked in the credits for any film I finish during your membership. You can also support me by streaming my music. I compose all of the scores for my own short films, and you can listen to those soundtracks on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to music. Just look up Joe Kendrick. That's JoeKendrick. Y'all have a wonderful day, and without further ado, I'll let you go.